Well, hello. We are glad you've joined us for Just a Thought here at the Sunshine Cathedral. You just heard a very vigorous shake from Bella, my dog Bella. Whenever she sees electronics in my lap, she thinks that is her invitation, that she should be there instead. Well, my laptop's not in my lap, but it's close enough. And so anyway, she may join us throughout the day. Who knows? This is Just a Thought, where the Reverend Cindy Lippert and I, you'll see her there, we discuss a thought for the week. We spend 15-20 minutes. Just we start out with a quote, and we see where that takes us, and sometimes some pretty interesting places. This week, we've really been focused in our midday prayers, in our sharing the chair discussion, in our Christians and Cocktails panel discussion. We've been really focused on prayer and praying we've got so many needs right now. There's still health concerns, and racism has just, we can't seem to get past it. It just keeps rearing its ugly head. And then that has led to violence, murders, and then those not being treated with the urgency they deserve have led to protests and riots. And so there's just angst and pain and difficulty. And that's in addition to just our normal lives, where we're still, trying to make ends meet, or worried about our kids or grandkids or siblings or neighbors or friends, or maybe we're trying to buy or sell property, or maybe we've been laid off or furloughed, or our business shut down, and we're wondering about how to get back at it, how to get back to work. We just have a lot of concerns for ourselves and our loved ones. And so we're praying. And so today's thought actually comes from Anne Lamott, who apparently is a person of prayer. I love her writings, very spiritual, very profound, but also very accessible. She just speaks from the heart, writes from the heart. Anne Lamott says, "I pray for people who are hurting, that they be filled with air and light. Air and light heal. They somehow get into those dark, musty places like spiritual antibiotics." Let me read that one more time. It's a little bit longer than our usual quotes, but it's so good, right? Anne Lamott says, "I pray for people who are hurting, that they be filled with air and light. Air and light heal. They somehow get into those dark, musty places like spiritual antibiotics." You think about that, Cindy Lippert?
Well, that is apropos of the times. I was just reading yesterday that getting out in the sunshine and the fresh air is the greatest antibiotic for this health challenge that we're experiencing now in the world, that we don't have a natural immunity for. And that staying in...
People walking and running and biking than ever before. People seem
right.
to get it.
Yeah, including me. So, yeah, walking is good. But light and air, two wonderful things. It's a known fact that oftentimes, and certain people are prone to being sensitive to not enough sunlight, not enough natural light. And when they live in areas that don't have great sunshine like we have in Arizona and the Southwest, and you've got in Florida, it's a challenge. And it is healing. It only makes sense that it's healing. But I think about all the people and families that are challenged now to move through this period of sequestering, and to experience new things, and to actually look for the blessings that are emerging in this forced pause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is always something. Robert Schuller used to say to look for, whenever there's loss, look for what's left.
Yes.
Be thankful for what is left. Build on that. Appreciate that. Go from there. And that sort of like that old story that, I'm sure every preacher's used the story, and I certainly have a bunch of times, about the two kids in in the same room, and they're knee deep in manure. And the one kid is like, "Ooh," and the other one is diving down into it, doing this. And the one kid who's grossed out says, "What are you doing?" And the kid playing in it says, "I know there's a pony in here somewhere."
That's right.
Something great produced all this mess, and I'm
That's right.
got to be a pony in here somewhere. And I think that those of us on a spiritual path, we try to train ourselves to look for that darn pony.
Oh yeah.
I'm knee deep in crap, but that means there's a pony somewhere.
That's right. Well, it reminds me of I was 5 years old, and I was sitting in the back seat of my grandparents' car, and they got stuck in the mud. And my grandmother sat in the front seat and worked the clutch and my grandfather pushed and pushed, finally got out of the mud, and we got off on our way. And what came right out of my mouth at 5 years old was, "Thank God for the messes we get out of."
Oh, right.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, if we can see the blessing in the middle of this, how many people became human doings in this society that are now confronted with, there's no difference between today and tomorrow, every day. And they're confronted with learning to relax. What also, I think many are thinking about perhaps a simpler life is of great value.
Yeah.
And how to go about that. You know, there are those you mentioned about finances. There are many that are concerned, might not get their jobs back, have been furloughed, you know, different things. And very concerned about finances. And I think of the great spiritual principle of paying it forward, and how that it's almost cliche that priming the pump is still such a powerful thing for us to do. You focus on what you have, not what you don't have. And I was taught tithing, you can call it for tithing, whatever. But if you don't have anything to give on what you didn't have to pay. Tithe on you do have. If, you know, soup was on sale, tithe on what you didn't have to pay for the soup, and find ways to pay it forward. And it's just a principle that works.
Yeah. When I was a very young pastor, my first pastorate, small rural church, they always give the new kids those churches, right? And the
rookies.
Yeah, they figure, they're lucky to have someone, and how much damage can they do? But in my first pastorate, it was a rural, and you know, people in the rural South, they have different, you know, they don't have the California lifestyle. You know, they're not eating avocados and running every day. You know, it was a different world, really. I mean, not for me, I'm from that world, but I'm saying different than a lot of us know now. And so people did a lot of things that, you know, weren't necessarily good for you. I mean, people would drink and smoke and eat fatty foods and all of that. And I did some of those things. I do some of those things. I love me some fatty food. But
yeah.
And so for a stewardship drive one year, I said, rather than try to get people to dig deeper or super spiritualize their giving or give till it hurts or, you know, whatever, I just said, think about how much money you spend on things that could be hurting you, that aren't good for you. Think about how much money you spend on diet sodas. You know, give yourself 1 or 2 beers a day, but every beer after that. How much money you spend on cigarettes or smokeless tobacco or cigars or whatever you think it is. Think about how much money you spend on things that aren't helping you, and give that same amount to the church.
Yeah.
And one of two things will happen. The church is going to come into a lot of money, or you're going to adjust your lifestyle because you can't afford to double up that, and you'll wind up being healthier. So either way, just think about the money you spend on hurting yourself, but the church is encouraging you and bringing you together and forming community and giving you hope. So that's something that's good for you. So take the money that you're spending that's not good for you and give that same amount to the church. It was actually, if nothing else, a way to get people to be conscious of how they were living and of the value that the church was to them. And so, yeah, I mean, there's just so many ways to think about participating in the circulation of divine supply. And I think that's important.
Well, it is. And I know there's been a lot of chatter out in the internet about why give to a church when church has been shut down and it's online, and it would seem that, there's no expenses there. And the simple answer to that is, it isn't about giving to a church, paying forward tithing. It isn't about giving to a church. It's about acknowledging that we live in an opulently supplied universe that is yours just for the taking, just because you were born. And because of that, we acknowledge and give a portion to that which spiritually feeds us, is, I think, the best idea. For an organization like Sunshine Cathedral and the Great Samaritan Institute, providing religious education for an affordable fee is groundbreaking. And to have a safe place for a community that have been marginalized their whole lives, this is something to celebrate. The fact that there's brick and mortar to support and lights and all of that, whether people show up or not, how valuable is that to have a place like that? And I think your community is very much aware of the value of that. But giving it forward is acknowledging that there's more of this where that came from, right, and I'm entitled to it.
My predecessor, the Right Reverend Grantland Ford, he used to say, when he was talking about tithing, he would say, when you take $1 out of your wallet to give in love, that creates a space in your wallet for another $1 to come.
There you go.
Yeah, that when you're giving in love, you're actually creating space for more to come into your life. Yeah. And also, people make a lot of assumptions about what churches do and what they don't do. We've been at least as busy, maybe busier, during this time of self-sheltering than ever before. We have gone to daily online programming. That we have staff doing something, bringing people together all over the world every single day, a couple of times a week, twice in a day. So we have been providing pastoral care as best we can, but by phone and email. We've been feeding between 500 and 1,000 people a week with our food sharing ministry, which is on site. And so, yeah, I mean, we don't have a room full of people on Sunday right now because nobody does. And that's really the only thing that's different about our world at Sunshine Cathedral, is that the room is empty, and yet we're still providing the same service as if the room was packed. And so, yeah, people don't know what churches do and what it costs. And I think that's good. I think that's good that we've done such a good job that we make it look easy and we make it look like it just happens effortlessly. So yay on us, but also don't be so quick to judge. There may be more going on than you realize. I do want to say, talking about Sunday worship, tomorrow is Pentecost. The Pentecost narrative in the book of Acts talks about a group meeting in an upper room in Jerusalem. And during that meeting, where there were people from all over the world, the story says, there was a sound like a rushing wind, and people seemed to experience something that they described as dancing flames over their heads, that there was basically light and air in that story. And so tomorrow we're going to be celebrating that time in church mythology, if not history, where there was a miraculous experience of light and air that was healing. The early church was hurting. The Jesus movement was hurting. Jesus had been executed. And so after some weeks, 7-8 weeks later, they're gathered together and praying, and they experience the healing power of air and light. So I love that we've chosen this thought right here at the time of Pentecost, that Anne Lamott says she prays for when people are hurting. She prays that they experienced air and light. And that was the experience of Pentecost that
Wow.
energized the movement and got people sort of moving through their grief and back into the world to continue being Christ in the world, to do what Jesus did, to touch the untouchable and love the unloved and bring hope to the hurting. And so Pentecost begins with the experience of light and air.
Well, the healing power of more than one coming together. Scripture tells us in the name and in the nature of the Christ, when two or more are gathered, there is power. And it always works out that way. For this to have happened this weekend, and today us thinking about this thought is serendipity.
Yeah, I was yesterday in the midday prayer, I was saying that, and this is just funny how consciousness is non-local. Jung talked about the collective unconscious, but I woke up yesterday with a thought in my mind, how long, O Lord? And that is the opening text to the prophet Habakkuk, where the prophet says, how long, O Lord? I call out and you don't seem to answer me, and I cry violence and you don't seem to do anything about it. And this was the morning after violence had erupted in Minneapolis. And so I used that scripture yesterday in our midday prayer discussion. And then I followed up with, because there's only, I think there's 3 chapters in Habakkuk, so that's chapter 1. And then in chapter 2, Habakkuk says, or Habakkuk imagines God saying to him, if the vision is delayed, wait for it, because it will come. And so, things just aren't always the way we want them to be. And they're not progressing as quickly as we'd like them to sometimes. And yet the vision of what can be is worth holding. So don't give up. Don't give up hope. Don't give up the vision. Keep waiting. Keep working. And we also know that what God does for us, God does through us. And so if God doesn't seem to be fixing it for us, maybe God is calling us to do the fixing. Maybe God has given us plenty of tools, and now it's up to us to use those tools. I just saw on social media the other day a meme that said, if you ask God to move a mountain, don't be surprised if God hands you a shovel. That seems to be how the universe works.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about Pentecost, that the Spirit comes and people receive these gifts, and then they're supposed to use them, and they go out and they change the world by using these gifts. And so God does give us gifts, but they're gifts for us to employ, gifts for us to use. And so, the light and the air, they refresh us, they help us, they heal us, and then we're meant to pay it forward. We're meant to tithe our light and air and be healers in the world. So, we got to keep holding that vision and doing our part to fulfill it.
This is also bringing up another thing, the story of Job. And you may recall, he lost his family, his livestock, he lost everything, lost his health, and shook his fist at God and couldn't quite figure it out. And all of a sudden it occurred to him. And in chapter 42, verse 10, and I think this is the pivotal, most profound idea that fits in today with those that we have terrible feelings toward right now. And that is, and the captivity of Job turned when he began to pray for his friends. Those friends that say, you may as well curse God and die. God doesn't like you very much.
You must have done something wrong. Your conscience was not right.
Exactly. And the captivity, all the trouble turned when he began to pray for these that said, curse God and die. And in fact, it goes on to say, he got back twice as much as he had before. And I remember studying that, Durrell. What was the twice? When we have peace within, we also radiate that out. So it's like 2 for 1.
Yeah.
So there's magic in not only paying it forward with our thoughts, words, and prayers and money, but also in our forgiveness.
My favorite part of the Job story is also, it's at the end, I think chapter 42, and he says, I have dealt with great things that I do not understand.
There you
I
go.
love that sometimes we're so busy trying to place blame or
Yeah.
figure it out. Why? I've said myself, how many times have I said when something was just the fit hit the shan, and my first response is, how did I create this? How did I manifest this? What did I do wrong? What terrible thought or feeling am I holding on to?
Yeah.
Like all this weird sort of new thought fundamentalism, which is just as unhelpful as any other kind.
Just as bad. Yeah.
So, and I just think there's something healing and refreshing and honest and beautiful about saying, you know, I've been through some stuff. I don't even know why necessarily, but I'm ready to feel better now.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to do what I can and for things to get better. I love that simple phrase. I have dealt with great things that I do not understand. Yeah. And that was at that same time that, you know, he's praying for his friends. He's getting his life back on track.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful drama. Not original to our scriptures. It's borrowed from another culture, but just a beautiful drama. If you take it too literally, then you've got God and the boogeyman having a spitting contest, and you know it gets a little crazy. But if you look for the themes, if you look for the lessons, yeah, you see that the rain falls on the just and the unjust.
There you go.
And at the end of the day, if your hope is restored and you've survived, you're the winner.
Yeah. Well, it's that breathing fresh air and being in the sunlight and letting go of that which you have no answers, and because of what it does to us, to move on down the road.
Our time's about up, and we know that people, they're watching the news and they're nervous. We know that there is fear and discontent and anxiety over one thing and another and another. This just isn't the world changed. The world that we knew ended all at once and then was replaced by something else. And we're still figuring out what that something else is. We're trying to get used to it and be good at it. And those kinds of changes, especially when they're that radical and that sudden, really throws us off, right?
Yeah.
And we know that people are looking for strength and guidance and hope and peace and connection. And so, I mean, it's just a thought, but I think it's a good one. I want to join Anne Lamott today, and maybe you too, and just praying for all these people that they experience air and light, because we know those are healing. And so whether that is metaphorical and spiritual, or whether that means going outside and taking some deep breaths in the sunshine, whatever, I'm certainly wishing everyone today air and light and the healing that represents.
I'm in agreement.
Well, then it's done. And so it is.
And so it is.
Thanks for joining us again for Just a Thought. We'll do it again next Saturday. God bless you.